Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of Walker. Great season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I love that this episode kind of represents kind of like the next chapter. Obviously, the ending of one arc. Obviously, they've teed up the next arc, but it is the closing of one chapter. It is kind of the question of what's next for everybody, kind of starting fresh, starting new with things and kind of picking up where other things left behind. That's kind of a line from Stella in this episode, and that encapsulates this episode so beautifully all around. First and foremost, we got to talk about the Davidson and Walker situation. So it turns out, what's Gail behind all of it the entire time? So the fact of the matter is, Jerry couldn't let it go about what her mom had said, and so it's like, right, especially after after our conversation with Nate and Frank, they would have never let that secret out. So Jerry's like, Gail had to have told Marv, but it's like, what else is she hiding? And so her and Cordell set up this whole like fake fight thing just to kind of make Gail think like, okay, Jerry's completely denouncing the Walker. She's more on my side. That way you kind of get her to let her guard down. But the moment Jerry starts talking about her dad and wanting to know about him more, and it's like, because she's getting a little offensive about the Walker, saying like, yeah, well, Abby knew, but Marv, I'm surprised you're not as mad at Marv as you are Abby. She's like, it's like, no, Abby's the one that kept the secret the entire time. But it's like, yeah, but Marv did too. Like, yeah, Abby did something wrong, but like Marv did the wrong thing in the first place too. And you could tell something was like holding her back. She was just kind of getting so upset about this conversation. And then it's like, right, Cordell actually suggested like take her to the barn. He did the same thing with Stan and when it came to Emily. So she does the same thing. And Gail ends up confessing. It is heartbreaking in the end. Like, there's many layers to it. It's just, for one, she got so angry. Because the problem is, she even says it later on, she never hated Abby. She just hated she wasn't Abby. Because Marv seemed like he cared. I mean, it is that complicated thing of, and I think I brought this up previously, of like, she was the one he was engaged to beforehand, so you always, and even if she didn't ever feel like second fiddle, Marv made her feel like that when he would constantly go to Abby and tell her everything. He talked to her more than he would Gail, because Gail was saying, especially at the time, their marriage was kind of rocky because all they did, like, they fought and argued all the time. And I think a lot of that, like, path untraveled, the road untraveled, what could have been, things working out, I think all those secrets, and just, I think it was all bubbling beneath the surface, and that just, like, led to everything, Because who knows what would have been if Marv had told her the truth from the very, very beginning about Jerry. If she hadn't said, like, oh, yeah, Jerry had died. Like, if he hadn't said that, then who knows where the Walkers, where the Davidsons would be right now. I mean, they still had their family issues, their things, but like Marv handled things the worst. But he didn't know. In no shape or form could Marv have ever seen the fallout that would have fell out. And because for her, he was looking for Denise and Cordell at the time, and he was worried. And then what really pissed Gail off is he's like, oh, by the way, he dropped it like it was such a second thought. And for her, it's like, no. You're concerned with Denise. I get that. You telling me my daughter that I thought was dead is still alive? You should have told. But he never told her he knew the entire time. All that he said was like, oh, she's living a good life. But I think in that moment, Gail's like, wait, if you've known, how long have you known? I think it wasn't probably till later on, because I don't think he ever explained to her how long he knew. Just said he knew, and he hid it from her. But what was pissing her off the most is it was a second thought, it was an afterthought, like, oh, by the way, that's what upset her the most. Understandable. It's like, this is something so important. They were already having their arguments. She was already heated. This just finally sent her over the edge. She bashed him over the head with a lantern, and the fire happened. And for Jerry, it's like, for one, she believed her adopted father was responsible for killing Marv. All right, for so long, everyone pinned it on Cordell. She in particular, Gail in particular, pinned it on Cordell. And now it's like, for one, Frank never did it, so there's some alleviation with that. It doesn't change the fact that your biological mom killed your bio dad. Two, it's also like, right, you blamed it on a teenager. Like, this has been hanging over the Walkers the entire time. Like, this guilt has been on Cordell the entire time because of the choice you made. And she's like, yeah, like, he left the lantern there, almost like, is that supposed to justify it? It's like if he hadn't left the lantern there, it's like, who's to say you wouldn't have found something else to murder Marv with? But for her, it was just, because she also didn't know Frank was there that night, so she would have would she have actually asked him for help? Who knows? But it's like, yeah, it wouldn't have looked good, and wife murdering her husband, like, so she did a lot to kind of convince herself. I think it's that revisionist history a little bit. I mean, that's the thing. You not only publicly on TV and news outlets and stuff blame the Walkers, Cordell in particular. You've said all that. You took them to court. You came back here still throwing it in Cordell's face, knowing the truth. But maybe somewhere deep down inside, it was a truth she could never fully accept. So even to herself, she was kind of lying and trying to convince herself of the lie she was telling herself. I mean, it's no different than Stan. Stan being all honky-dory with the little Walkers. Yeah, you didn't pull the first trigger on Emily, but you sure as hell pulled the ones afterwards. Because he shot Emily like once or twice afterwards. So it's like, you are the one who actually killed her. She would, and you're just hanging with the Walkers like it's nothing. She's around her family, around your daughter, your grandson, and then like blasting the Walkers. But it's just because there were some parts of like, it just, the reality of it, she couldn't bring herself. She was too prideful. She was just too hurt with everything that she could never admit the truth. Until now, being confronted by Jerry. And it's sad how history repeated itself. The fire started in the barn. Gail got knocked out. I love the cutback between Walker, Cordell present day and past. Like, he tried to go back then, and now it's like, yeah, he's not the same kid he was then. It was him saving Gail. There was layers to that. It's just like, right, this is what I do. I'm a Texas Ranger. I help people. I save people. But also, it's like putting a bow tie on something that's been hanging on him for so long. Even Abby's like, you've had to carry this for so long, the blame. Because even August is like, how the hell could she take you to court knowing she was responsible for it? And, Gail, talks to Cordell. She's like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry can't even begin to describe how I feel. But for Walker, it's more like, this is a way for this to finally end, And she's like, I'll confess to everything I've done. And for Abby, it was this moment of like, she's like, we didn't get along, Gail, sure, but I was furious for you. Because she's the one that told Marv to tell Gail. And that's also the rub of it all, too. It's like, because it's not just Cordell who's had this thing hanging over. I mean, obviously we know Bonham's had his whole thing because of the secret he was keeping between the race between him and Marv. But also Abby, she's been keeping this secret this entire time, feeling so guilty of like, right, it's not my secret to tell now that Marv's gone. Like, do I tell the truth about that? Because he's like, I never found out whether, because she just assumed, because she never knew whether Marv told Gail or not. And she's carried that guilt for so long. So Gail's known but she could never admit like, oh, like I'm gonna go out there and find my daughter, because it would be admitting that Marv told her. So I don't know whether she just was hoping like, oh, knowing that her child was out there somewhere, it's like, oh, you'll come back to me at some point in time, and luckily it did. It just happened to work out that way, because she didn't know it was, because all he said was like the child was alive. I don't think he didn't bring up Frank or anything, so she didn't know it was Jerry. She just knew that Jerry was out there in the world. So, but yeah, like, it's an alleviation for not only Cordell but also Abby. It's like, right, she's been carrying this for so long, this guilt of, I should have told Marv should have told Gail, not knowing if she did or not. That's also the thing too. I'm sure that bothers Gail the most too. It's like, Marv would have never told her the truth if Abby hadn't suggested it. That's also just once again another thing of, it's just like, I didn't hate you. I just wish I hate myself for not being you. You have Denise apologizing to Cordell that she's like, I'm sorry that I did believe, that believe that you were responsible. And even Cordell started to believe it himself. It's like, we started to believe our worst nightmares, you know? So, but now both families can start to heal. Dan and Denise is just kind of like, her entire world is falling apart. Because she even says, like, I based my marriage on, like, the falsehood of what she believed her parent, because she was young at the time, so she probably never saw the cracks in their marriage. Like Colton kind of has seen the ones in theirs, but, you know, no marriage is foolproof. Like, you know, relationships in general are hard. There's going to be issues. And I think for Denise, like, you know, where her and Dan stand, I think maybe they can make amends. I think things can get better. This is all about healing across the board, you know, because Colton, him and Stella are watching all of this play out, and she's like, we don't have to watch this. He's like, I think we do. I think it's up to us. Like, we have to see, like, how this all comes to an end, you know. But he's like, yeah, but it's not going to be the end of us. And Stella's like, no, we're not them. But, you know, Colton's like, yeah, but except in the ways that we are. Denise admits to Colton she's the one that cut because I kept being like, oh, was it? Because like I said, my entire time I was like, oh, was it Gail? Did Gail convince Denise? It's like, no, it seems like Denise did it on her own because Denise was so angry. She was like, the Walkers had robbed so much. She's like, they took Dad away from me, and something that she let what her mom say get inside of her head of like, oh, this belongs to us. So now it's like, yeah, she was even more sure that they were responsible for her dad's. So she wanted them to pay. She wanted them to lose. So she did cut the saddle. Wasn't and that's a sad thing. Her mom needlessly fanned the flames of this issue, and also this. I mean, because also like her and Cordell like fell apart afterwards because of everything, and that was also the thing too of like, because Abby said like, I felt bad for you, and then you took us to court, and then you basically like, I saw the weight of like what that did to my son, and that was on you. You made those choices, so. And at the end of the day, Gail does say, I am sorry. For Denise, her entire world's upside down, but at least Colton's like, no, I don't want to be like that anymore. It's okay, Mom. And hugs her. I think this is a good healing process all around. The sad thing is where Jerry and Cordell stand, because Jerry's like, maybe us was too soon. We hadn't really found ourselves as people. Like, we hadn't fully processed and grown as people with our respective situations everybody going through. And we kind of just skipped over this many steps and just ended up where we were, like, dating. It's like, no, like, I think they can find their way back to each other, but it's going to be a complicated road. Because it's like, you're right, Cordell's got everything with Emily, Jerry's got everything with Hoyt, then on top of all that, she's got all this Davidson drama, and then, like, her and Cordell, like, it's just, we jumped the gun a little too soon, you know, but it's like, maybe given them more time, we can find our way right back to each other, I think, and I hope so. I think they're good for each other, so... I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how that ends up playing out. Once again, you kind of get into that complicated territory. It's like, well, if Cordell and Jerry start dating, it's like, well, what does that mean about Stella and Colton? It's like, that kind of gets in that weird territory, kind of like that Riverdale territory of like, oh, Alice and FP dating at the same time Jughead and Betty are. You kind of get in that territory, so... But, you know, if everyone's happy and, you know, it's kind of a weird situation that everyone would have to probably somewhat acknowledge, but, yeah. It's going to be interesting to see where things kind of go from there. Also, at the same time, obviously Stella, Colton, Todd, they're graduating, and I'm glad to see that they're all kind of good, because Todd's like, Todd's like, yo, Todd, you made it, and he turns to Colton, he's like, no, man, we did it. I was like, I'm glad the band's not together, but at least you can be friendly enough, you know? And it's like, right, him and Stella are still going to the same school. I don't think Colton is, so they're going to probably have to figure out, I don't think he's going to the same school as those two, but trying to figure it out. And August, he's like, he's talking to Trey, and Trey's like, oh yeah, your sister knows who she is, so she'll be able to figure life out, whatever it is next for her. And August, because he's asking August, like, well, are you going to be okay with your big sister not being here anymore? And he's like, yeah, because I'll still have you. And it's like, yeah, because everyone he's kind of tight with is amongst his group of like Colton, Todd, and Stella are gone. Like, that's kind of his core group. So, I mean, we've seen a little outside of that group, sure, but that's like his core foundation there. So without them around, it would be interesting to see what school is kind of like for August. But obviously Trey's got a lot to think about because James offered him straight up the Ranger position, which he's not sure how he feels about it yet. It's a lot to think about becoming a Ranger, but for James, I think what he saw in Mickey, he sees in Trey. The need to always want to help people, always want to do the right thing. And I think he also sees Trey as his potential successor because Cordell was like, yeah, that's not me. I can't give the orders, but I can be the one to follow the orders and see it through. So I think I think James is setting Trey up to be his successor. Kind of like I said, what he was doing with Mickey. Other than that, he does talk to his mom about it, which obviously his mom's going to have her reservations about it. She was like, she saw it as it finally made her believe in God the moment Trey left the military, because it's like, yes, like she doesn't have to worry, and now it's like that anxiety is all going to come back if he decides to go down this route. But for Trey, he feels like this might be the right thing, might be the thing he's searching for. I do love that him and Cassie are hallmates. And it's like, wait, you live in the apartment like across from mine? She's like, there was only like 2 available. Don't look too much into it. Think too much about it. So that's definitely going to be interesting. It does seem like they might just keep that a friend route and nothing more. Because it's like, she's going on a date. He's like, all right, cool. Well, I'm sure he's not probably too quick to jump into any new relationships and stuff like post Mickey, I think, you know. After a big kind of breakup like that, probably want to kind of take their stride and take your time, but I do like that because they did set that up previously, that they were going to be in the same building together and stuff. Like, what was that, 2 episodes ago they set that up, so. She was trying to say, like, oh, we could be roommates. He's like, no, we're not. It's like, yeah, see you later, roomie. So it's like, but they're like right across from each other, so we'll see where things kind of go from there. But what was really interesting is she went on a date with a guy. The moment he started kind of dodging what he did for work, I was like, she's like, oh, are you a contract killer? And he's like, well, you know, if I tell you the truth, I'm like, they're joking. I'm like, the sad thing is he actually is going to be a killer or something. But then he was like, oh, I show sheepman. I'm like, okay. And then he walks away and he has a gun. I'm like, are we going to find out you're actually both cops and you just didn't know it? But it's like, nope, he was sent to keep an eye on her. It was recon. I also love the bartender being like, yo, did he stiff you on the bill? He's like, don't worry, I got you in this round. I was like, yo, that's super cool of that dude. He must see that from time to time, like, oh, like people getting stiffed on bills. It's like, nah, I got you. Maybe from time to time. It's like, yeah. So she ends up telling James about it later on. I was like, right, whatever this is, whatever Fitton was involved in, whatever Miles was investigating, all of this, because the people involved are ex-military people, not all from the same unit too. So this definitely, because now the thought was, did this have anything to do with Serrano? But Walker was, well, at least he was talking to Liam about it. He's like, he thinks this is kind of a whole other beast. But wasn't someone, because Serrano was ex-military, wasn't he? Maybe there's some correlation, some connection there. Like maybe Serrano was small fries compared to who's ever in charge of this. Like this seems like some large scale organization that Miles like happened to get mixed up in. For whatever reason, like it must go pretty high up for Fenton to try and kill. Well, I mean, it's the guilt about how he handled the whole Miles and Rita thing, but also he didn't want to talk because like this is such a big thing that it scared him. So some very, very powerful people must be involved. Once again, I wonder if there's a Stan situation to this. Like once again, maybe he knows something more with what's going on. Maybe that's also why Stan also says something about Gale, because I mean he just knew Gale in general, but also it's like, right, one guilty party holding a big secret could recognize it in someone else. Maybe that's all there really was to it. Maybe he recognized a kindred spirit in that regard. Then there's the whole Liam situation, because Liam's trying to figure out what he's going to do next, because he doesn't even think law is something he wants to do. And obviously, you know, he respects his dad of like, his dad's always known what his purpose is. Even with Dan and the ranch, you still put the time in to take care of that land. And it's like, well, you know, and even he's kind of like, well, what are we going to do now? Like, we have no ranch, we have no land. But after everything's settled, they're back home, And it's like, even Abby's like, yeah, it doesn't feel like it wasn't the celebration they were hoping it was going to be. At least they have Stella to focus on. That is something to celebrate, but everything else is just complicated. It doesn't feel as good as you thought it would be coming back home. But Bonham's like, then we'll make things better than they were before. We'll find a way, because there's still so many, there's so much to celebrate. And Abby's like, with you? Always. And Liam talks about his high school graduation. He's like, you also you told me how proud you were, Dad, but you also said I'm sorry. And he's like, for what? That you didn't want me to move out east, but you allowed me to anyway, because you and it's like, even for Bonham, it's like, yeah, because it helped make you into the person that you are today. He's like, no, you helped make me into the man that I am today. And it's deciding that he's going to, because for the longest time, like, Bonham didn't have anyone that would kind of take over the ranch. Like, it did seem like Cordy or Liam had any interest in it, but now Liam's like, no, like, this is it. Like, this is something I want to do. So I think Bonham's going to start leaving everything to Liam, because there was also the conversation about, well, will August or Stella want anything to do with the ranch? So once again, a lot of building stuff up, but also picking up where we left off. Because I love that metaphor, especially because for Cordell, her and her are playing that board game, and it's like, yeah, we haven't played this since the night Emily called and when she died. And so Cordell says that if it wasn't for Stella, who he was in the past, never would have even looked at this game, would have been too afraid to. But that's what Stella is. She's the heart of this family. She makes the entire family feel. She holds them together. When I ran away, you're the one that kind of brought me back. And she's like, yeah, I ran away a few times. He's like, yeah, but that was always to bring me back. So you've always had to be here. You've always had to stay here to hold this family together. And that's always been her thing of like, yeah, like even last season with Trevor, like, she's like, my family needs me, so I can't go. But Cordell's giving her permission. It's like, you can go now. Everything's okay. Because even she's like, I never thought we'd be okay after Mom died. I know we're still missing a piece. That piece, like, that void isn't filled or anything. But for the first time in a long time, she's hopeful. And I think that's a beautiful thing that, it's like, right, you can go off, baby girl, like, the fact of the matter is, like, things between her and Colton are good. And he's like, that's amazing. And, getting all gushy, being like, I'm gonna go ahead and give you a heads up, but I'm going to give a big speech. And she's like, no, don't. And she's like, yeah, at your graduation, I'm going to give the big speech at your celebration and stuff. But giving her permission to go, because she has been the one that's kind of like, right, reluctant to go because she's afraid to leave her family behind. But we're good now. You've helped put us back in a good spot. We're all, they've talked things through. They're like, everyone's more open and connected than ever before. So yeah, it's been hard since Emily, but I came back. And I'm here now, not going anywhere. So you can go off, like, live your life, do what you need to do and want to do. So I think that's kind of beautiful in that regard. I had brought it up previously. I was wondering, they didn't cover it at all, so I guess we will get more and more of the Davidsons going forward, maybe. But, because Denise still is the DA and everything, and so I was worried that, like, right, her and Dan would decide to move. I mean, it could still always be a thing in the future, but Colton's going off to college, so maybe that won't be as much of a thing. We'll see how that plays out. Because the entirety of the future could just be like, upcoming future could just be like that summer between, graduating high school and starting college. Like that summer could be like the entire next season. You never know. So it just depends on how they want to structure it. But once again, the timing is interesting. Like this whole Davidson storyline, the Walkers and the Davidson, it all coming to an end to some extent, which is interesting. And I talked about it before, like how that is poetic, considering we're seeing the beginning of it in Walker's. Once again, I think it's Walker Independence. But at the very end, Cordell convincing Trey that, like, nah, like, you're good, like, this is a right fit for you. Plus, you and me out there fighting crime together, kind of badass. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of cool. And him and Liam doing the race and everything, and yeah. And the moment they couldn't find where Cordell was, and we saw that van driving away, I was like, he got taken. And it's like, yep. by whoever is involved in all of this. I guess they were keeping an eye on. They were keeping an eye on Cassie, but decided to come after Cordell. Not less. I mean, I don't think. I was about to say not unless this has some These are remnants of Serrano's group being like they just took this opportunity to get him now instead of like. But that's the thing. Why grab him now? Like, why take this chance? Why kidnap a ranger? That starts getting into that. I mean, I guess they were like fine with like people thinking Miles was dead. So. But I feel like that draws too much attention. But to be fair, they're already neck deep in your business to some extent. Even if they're just scratching the surface, you still don't want them getting that close. I guess you figured you take this opportunity. It's like, man, just when you should be celebrating, it's like, right, this ends up happening. So quite the interesting stinger. I mean, last season had its stinger too of Serrano's people watching Cordell and them. So. As I was mentioning earlier, Walker is coming back for another season. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where season 3 takes us. By then, will Trey be a ranger? Will he end up taking up the badge to help track down Walker? This investigation, how high up does it go? Where's the next story? Now that, once again, the Davidsons, I'm assuming, are still going to be around and kind of, because regardless of everything, that's still Jerry's family. So I can understand them not completely like getting rid of them. And I think there's still story to tell of like the Walkers and the Davidsons, taking that history that they have and finally squashing it and finding a way to move forward, to heal together. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what season 3 has in store for us, what new characters we're going to potentially get, what new stories. I'm excited to find out. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.